Okay, let's see. So I just do this to go forward. When I first started coming out with this as my subtitle, native junipers that benefit Texas Karst country. Oh, I had lots of people say, wow, you're so brave to put that on there. And I'm like, yes, I am. Okay. Um, Overview. Basic, explaining the mountain cedar, mistakes we made that made things worse. We forgot its history, rethinking mountain cedar management, and wrap up. So, the Texas Hill Country is prone to flash floods, droughts, and wildfires. We all know this. The question is, could changing how we manage mountain cedars increase resilience to these things? Basics. Quick botany, they are junipers. Um, the one that you most are familiar with is Junipers ovata, Ashii, but there's also Junipers ovata that occurs around New Braunfels and in parts of Big Bend. The two hybridize, but this research is still new, like 2 years old. So, we're still figuring out how this can impact things. The reason why they're called cedars has nothing to do with the cedars genus, it has to do with the fact that all these trees have cedar oil. So that's why when people were coming over, they didn't have Home Depots, so they'd be out there looking, smelling everything because they knew the wood, the timber that would have those decay resistant attributes. So they go around, oh, this smells like cedar. Okay, we're going to call it a cedar. When they were across the Atlantic seaboard, it was Eastern red cedar. When they got here, they realized, oh, we got something different. So they called it mountain cedar. And that's just the name I've been using to include because of the fact that we have more than one species. They have tiny scale-like leaves and fleshy cones. So each of those little blue berries is actually a pine cone, but it gets real fleshy. They've been growing in Texas for thousands of years. That's been shown by archaeological findings. The male trees give a winter algae called cedar fever and affects mostly city people. I mean, not like a small town, but like big city people because they have more air pollution and urban heat island that exacerbates all allergies. The lightweight pollen has been found as far north as Canada. Some papers have shown that as the particulates get high up in the atmosphere, that they can help create basically cloud seeding that can create more rain. Unfortunately, doesn't help us down here because it's all blowing northwards. Distribution. So they grow from Mexico to Missouri, but mostly in Texas. The green outline that's showing the original before they realized that there was hybridization going on. This is the range of the Junipers ashii. You can see it goes all the way up to the Ozark Mountains. And the belief is that around 8,000 years ago, instead of having these isolated populations, that was all connected. And the red at the bottom, that's the range of the Ovada. So you can see how it goes New Braunfels and it loops up and it goes into Mexico.
How is the run different from the Oshawa?
Um, it's still being detailed, but when I spoke to Dr. Robert Adams, who unfortunately passed away about 2 years ago, he just simply told me over the phone that they definitely are found with forests. While the ash juniper, you're going to find more in the open rangelands because it seems that their growth habits can look similar, but it seems that the ash juniper might be a little bit more aggressive and capable of spreading out into degraded, really hot, sunny areas. So it still is a lot that's being studied. One of the ways is to look at whipleaf glands on them. And you can look, and the ovadas always have oval whipleaf glands. I have found the population in New Braunfels, and it appears that they have a slightly blue cast to the leaves, but that still needs to be confirmed. So it still is a new thing. They both prefer limestone bedrock regions, and these are called karst country. You might have heard it called karst landscapes, karst terrain. It's anywhere that's underlaid by large, where it's, predominated by limestone. The Edwards Plateau is the biggest karst country in Texas and one of the biggest ones in the United States. The hill country is the eastern part of the Edwards Plateau. And, we have lots of like rock outcroppings, your sinkholes, caves, hillside springs, all these things. And there's a dependent bird, the endangered golden cheek warbler, depends on the shredding bark from older mountain cedars that are at least 40 to 50 years old to build its nest. And wherever you find the golden cheek warblers, it indicates healthy forest conditions. So I like to view it more as a forest health indicator as opposed to an endangered species, because to me, if you have the warbler, you have good mating pairs that are reproducing, that's going to mean, okay, that's a healthy forest. And I think that's something everyone should want, is a healthy forest. Blaming. Okay, what is it we want? We want a hill country that is safe, has abundant clean water, good grass, and healthy ecosystems. What we were told to do to achieve this: clear the mountain cedars. And this started in 1939 in the Cattleman magazine, where Ross Jenkins wrote, the region is now overrun by the sap cedar that has spread like an octopus from the breaks, sapping the underground of that much needed subsoil moisture and killing grass. So over the decades that followed, the mist just kept snowballing, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So here's a nice collection of the claims that have evolved over the last 100 years. All mountain cedars use 33 gallons of water per day, and live oaks only use 19 gallons of water. Their canopies and leaf litter intercept almost 75% of rains. And that if you clear at least up to about 90% of not just the mountain cedars, but all the woody stuff, you can get 170,000 gallons more water per acre. I mean, these were the things that were coming out by range managers who were saying that the more woody stuff we clear, the more runoff we'll get, the more water that we'll have. Tunnel focus. If you know anything about erosion, the fact that we live in Flash Flood Alley, when we get droughts, the last thing you want to do is to come and do massive clearing. The other claims were that they kill grass and nothing grows under them. Nothing eats them, and wildlife don't need them. They're highly flammable because they have terpenoids, and frequent fires kept them inside protected canyons. So each of these things in its own little snapshot can be seen be true to a degree. But when you put it all together, it's not. It's like, you cannot take ecological issues and do these like little tiny snapshots. You have to look at the bigger picture. We played the blame game because we didn't want to blame ourselves, but we're really the ones who put ourselves in the situation. And so you come out with newspapers and the politicians were getting on board, just everything, just trying to get rid of the mountain cedars. So the clearings began in the countryside and the cities and gave developers justification to clear cut. I have literally seen articles where developers are saying, why are you all so upset? We just cleared all the cedars. We just increased your water supplies by clearing out all the vegetation. But what were the mistakes that we made? We ignored regional challenges. Again, the hill country, the Eastern Edwards Plateau, is part of the limestone region called Karst country. Karst country has thin soils that takes 10 to 40 times longer to rebuild. We have extreme weather, and that degrades any exposed soil. We have complex geology. So that karst geology under that soil is in variation. If you ever, set a fence line, and that every time you dig a post hole, it's like, oh my God, it's like totally different than it looked 10 feet away. Wow, I only had to go down that far for that one. That one could only go down that far. And this picture here on the right shows an area that used to be covered by forest. And you know that because of all the little dimples on the rock. But you see how it's all broken and striated? That's how it is under the soil, which means that if a tree is growing in one spot, it may not ever have access to cave waters and deeper waters, but a tree growing in another spot will have easy access. So you know, that was a big problem. We focus on the symptom. Mountain cedars are just a symptom. The real problem is too much runoff due to soils that have degraded over the last 150 years of overgrazing and clear cutting. The more runoff that you get, the less rain can soak into the ground. Now, when rain soaks into the ground, it's called infiltration. And the less infiltration you have, the more erosion and flooding you get. So you understand? I mean, so if the water can't soak into the ground, it's just going to go downhill and contribute to erosion and flooding. When you have less infiltration, that also means that the soil is not getting enough water. And so you have more degraded soil. Like the microbes that live in the soil, they need that water. The humus in the soil, the organic matter, all needs that extra water. That leads to dehydrated plants that are more prone to catching fire. You also, because when you have less infiltrating water, you have reduced groundwaters. So you have less drought and wildfire resistance. So it all really just comes to the idea that we need more water in the ground. And yet over the past 50 years, we were taught, no, we need more runoff. Remember when I showed that claim there that says that that if you clear up the 90%, you can increase the water by this much? They were talking about the runoff because they want that runoff to go down to the cities and things like that. They don't want the water to stay in the land. They want to move off of the land. Repeated clearing increases runoff and exposes the soil to more degradation, more so where it's being overgrazed. And basically that looks like the surface of the moon. Okay, so the other problems, we lumped all mountain cedars together. Many land managers and agencies label all mountain cedar cover as undesirable woody brush. We ignored site-specific adaptations, age groups, tree stand types, and soil health. For instance, in this picture on the left is your pioneer scrub. And now you see a lot of that when you're going around, but on the right there, that's forest. Those are mostly, that forest is composed of at least 60% mountain cedars that are 40 to 50, some are 60 feet tall. And yeah, I mean, that's a totally different kind of cover. And we've been just taught, oh, just clear all the cedar, clear all the cedar. So that means it makes it almost impossible to really nurture and regenerate the forest. We put politics ahead of science. Data was cherry-picked, taken out of context, some science was misleading, and historical accounts were misinterpreted. That water study where it said that one mountain cedar uses 33 gallons of water per day. That was looking at a 10-foot mountain cedar on the left. About 100 yards away, Dr. Bill Dugas did another study of a 10-foot mountain cedar that looked pretty much like that one. And look how much water he came up with. 1 to 6 gallons of water per day. Which number do you think the media ran with? Because people were literally trying to find justification to get rid of them. And when I spoke to Dr. Owens, he was just flabbergasted. He's like, I don't know. And he says, at the end of my paper, I say, no, this doesn't apply to all mountain cedars because of the karst geology underneath. It's so variable. He knew that. This was just a quick estimate. He basically did while drinking a beer. It was just, and so when I spoke to Dugas, he said, yeah, I don't understand why the number was so much lower. And it's because of the karst geology underneath. And that's one of the problems when you're doing things tunnel vision. It would be better to have had a geologist on their team that could have pointed out the changes. And so what they have found that now, so once they realized that, and they did bring the geologists in, They said, okay, we can't just measure one tree, we have to measure entire stand. So then you come up with an average. And once they did that, the water use was just like any other forest tree. It's the same as live oaks, so once you average it out, the water use is typical. Uh, they do not intercept 75%. Dr. Owens discovered that the percent accidentally included the soil moisture. So the soil, once you correct the number, the interception is 40%. And that's about the same as a really healthy, robust cover of little bluestem and Indian grass. So it's normal. It's typical. You see how things were just being blown out of proportion. Um, New Texas A&M studies revealed that mountain cedars sink 3 times more rain into the ground and have 20 times more groundwater under them than adjacent ground grass cover. That is that changes the whole ballgame, right? And this research came out, I don't know, 5 years ago, so it's still pretty new, and it's still being resisted, but it's starting to get out there that people are finally starting to concede, okay, maybe it's not a water hog. But the thing to remember here is that they were studying, do you see that grass in the foreground? That's the type of grass that they're looking at. The one where they said, oh, you should clear everything to get more runoff. And that's the grass that results. That's also from overgrazing. So this is what we're trying to, promote as good, but obviously it's not working because all that runoff is just flowing away. Basically, by overclearing, overgrazing, it's been driving our lands into towards rocky desertification. And in 2020, Brad Wilcox and Pedro Leite wrote, in semi-arid karst landscapes, woody plant encroachment, especially juniper, can play an important role in enhancing groundwater recharge by improving soil and infiltration. I can never say that. Someone say it for me. And yes, thank you. Infiltrability.
Say
And although, okay, so then that's the water. Now, people are saying that, it kills the grass and all that. And although lab studies show some allelopathy, which is plants that exude toxins, like black walnuts are well known to do this, can exude toxins to reduce or limit the growth of some plants around them. The thing is, out in the field, it's not enough to actually reduce the growth. The real culprits are shade, degraded soil, or the matted leaf litter that can start to build up over time, and people that prune up the mountain cedars. Because when mountain cedars are not pruned up, they act as living cages to protect our beloved native plants coming up. Like here, this is a Texas ash on the left. Top right, Miss Flower, middle, madrone, bottom, Texas red oak, and poison ivy. It's just fun because deer love to eat poison ivy. I always use that as a thing that if I go into an area and I see lots of poison ivy, I know you don't have very many deer because they actually like to eat it. And so these are literally living cages because even though deer lightly browse the juniper leaves, especially in spring when it's fresh growth coming out, they don't do it enough. And plus with that cedral oil aroma, it confuses the deer. So that's how, really good native plants use this as a cage to come up because they're kind of hidden from the deer. So this is why I always tell people, if you have an area where you want to reduce some of the cedar, first walk through there with those red surveyor flags and do it in spring, summer, fall, when stuff is growing, and put flags wherever you see some good stuff popping up. Those are the ones that you're not going to prune up or remove. So you keep those as the living cages. Most wildlife depend on the fruits as a winter staple. You got the acorns and nuts, that's your fat and your protein, but you also need carbs. Well, that's where the carbs come from. And Burl Armstrong with Plateau Wildlife Management, he always talks about when he used to manage a a ranch over by Valverde, and he said almost every deer's paunch contained juniper berries. I've come up to a deer that was drunk on eating the fermented berries and just turned around and went right back to eating. So the berries are very popular, but they also use, of course, the shredding bark, and not just the warbler, but every nesting animal in the hill country that makes the nest is going to use that shredded bark. I mean, it's perfect material. The juniper hair streak butterfly uses it. It lays its eggs on it, so the little caterpillars can use it as a larval food. The thing here also is the little warbler there. See how it's got a caterpillar in its mouth? That came from an oak tree. So those oak, how the oaks will get all the caterpillars just infesting them and everything. Well, if you got warblers nearby, they're in there and they're eating all those, so they help the oaks. Mountain cedars contain terpenoids, which are flammable, but they're only highly flammable when the trees are dead, mostly dead, or when growing as single bushes and grass, because a single bush surrounded by grass is going to be a lot more flammable. And they can be used as fire breaks if hydration is greater than 60%, more so if it's above 70%. And the picture there is showing a sponge, a cellulose sponge, that I had put in my kitchen, hoping that I wouldn't burn down my kitchen. And I saturated it with water and I put it on top of the flame there, and it did not ignite. And that's how, even if they have terpenoids in them, if they're well hydrated, remember, how do you keep plants well hydrated? You make sure that more water is soaking into the ground to enhance that soil so that the plants remain more hydrated. And another thing that was interesting at the Ask Juniper Symposium 2 years ago, Justice Jones, who was the wildfire guy for the city of Austin, he's done a lot of prescribed burns and said very often oaks will torch out before junipers. And he said it's just a myth. It's just enough people have seen dead brush piles of the cedar catch fire, and therefore they think it's all highly flammable, but it's really just when it's dead or very dry. A more effective solution is to harden our communities to decrease fire risk. Uh, this is from UCLA just last year, writing about all the fires, and they've been going through and studying people who've been hardening their communities. Y'all know what that means, to harden your community. If you live next to a wild kind of area, you do things like take the leaves out of the gutters. You want any kind of opening, a vent hood or anything should have a steel mesh screen. You do all these things to harden the community. If you have a wooden privacy fence that turns into your house, you should either replace it with wire, steel, aluminum, or paint it with a fire retardant paint. So you do all these things to make it so that your community can handle a fire and not be so flammable. The picture there is from Oak Hill, from the Oak Hill fire in 2011. They found that 70% of the homes, which were built in the 1970s, they all had the whirlywig attic vents that they just sucked in all the embers. And that is what 70% of the homes burned, because they sucked in embers. And none of them had a nice steel mesh underneath it to keep the embers out. So you want to really focus on the embers that are being thrown once a forest catches fire. Once it reaches the canopy, that's the biggest danger, because those can be thrown up to 2 miles away. But all you have to do is, instead of like trying to clear out the vegetation, instead make your home able to handle the fire. And also to resolve things like this. Okay, the arrow's pointing to 3 things. One, at the bottom, is the fact that this is a roadway where people are often flicking cigarettes out of their cars. That starts a lot of fire. And it's a good idea for all the counties, whatever, to keep a mowed area along, especially during fire season, so that those cigarette butts have very little biomass to, ignite. The giant pile of dead cut cedar. right next to the edge of trees. So basically, a fire can start from a cigarette butt being thrown into the grass. If the grass is taller, because the grass is the most flammable thing we have, that's just fine fuel, and it will carry it to the brush pile. Once that starts to burn, then that starts throwing embers and starts to burn everything else. And the power line above, that's the other problem. So you don't want to have piles of dead brush against a forest that is near a roadway or under a power line, because power lines also start most fires. Okay. Also is to limit forest defragmentation and thinning, since it dries forest out. There's a lot of thing where everyone's saying, oh, we should thin out the forest. That applies to other places that have very tall trees, like in California, the Southeast and all that. Their tree canopies start a lot higher up. Okay, ours are a lot lower. And so we have to have a different strategy, and we should not be using the strategy that they're using in California. So instead, trying to keep forest as continuous as possible with as few breaks as possible will help to maintain a more humid, cooler micro interior, inside of that forest, to make it more fire resistant. And they have found this to be true of these like forests that exist in the middle of the African Sahara, where you got fires all the time burning. And they're able to survive. And these are old growth forests. They're able to survive. The other thing also is that if the mountain cedars were so flammable, the logic goes is that, okay, they're so flammable, therefore they were just confined into the canyons. But forests were not confined to canyons, since fires were actually less common than are being reported. A lot of people say, oh, the hill country was burning every 5 years, every 10 years, every 5 years. There's no evidence that happened. No one has one shred of proof to support that. Instead, we had things like this painting that was done in about 1870 that shows that, yes, trees were growing on the hills. They were not, and then also that there were tons of trees, that all the cabins were made out of logs. Most of them were made out of mountain cedar logs. If we didn't have hardly any trees, we've been building houses outside like they were doing in the Great Plains. And this map here, have y'all ever read Del Winnegar's book, The Explorer's Texas? Oh, y'all should get it. It's absolutely fantastic reading. He has 2 volumes. The first one focuses more on the vegetation, and then the second one more into the wildlife. And he just digs in. But one of the things he did is he went through all these witness tree, like land surveys, and recorded all the witness trees and all that, and was able to come up with these maps from, and these are land surveys from about 1860, okay? And the map is showing the black dots show all the counties that reported upland forest, not just in the canyons. And look how many. See the Edwards Plateau. Now you know where I'm talking about the hill country. Look how almost every county in the hill country reported upland forest. And the blue there in the background, that's showing the karst country. You can see how the karst country in Texas has a lot of upland forest. The hill country was about half wooded and half open. Mountain cedars grew in the bottomlands and covered the hills. The open rangelands in between were definitely more open grass. This quote here is interesting. 1766, in Real County, we came to hills that were thickly covered with wild cedar. Mountain cedars were common in the hill country, less so in the western Edwards Plateau. That was more open. It was just as drier. The terrain is more open. So if a fire started, there were fewer fire breaks to slow it down. So that just simply, it was more open. But also that's where most of the bison were, and the movement, the roaming of the bison and eating stuff, that they would have contributed to keeping the woody plants out of the open rangelands. And the white-tailed deer would follow them and eat up any of the woody browse that came up afterwards. But, and this here is describing that quote there, Texas in 1848 is describing the Balcones escarpment and saying that live oak, holly, and the millions of cedar that cover the Comal Hills like a mantle preserve the pleasant picture of summer. The other thing is this picture shows is about 1890, I think, of a cedar chopper family. And if anyone's ever read anything about cedar choppers, they were very common across the hill country. You have entire towns named after them. If there were only a few little mountain cedars here and there, how in the world did the entire subculture evolve to just cut a few little trees here and there? So you would not have had this entire subculture established. Okay, what we forgot. Okay, so in the 1800s, when people were first going through and describing the mountain cedars, they only were describing them as trees. They never described the bushes. If there were bushes, they never mentioned them. They were always talking about, because remember I said, is that they were looking for timber, decay-resistant timber. So if there were some bushes, they just simply didn't even notice them. But they were growing as trees, not bushes. And what we get mostly today are the bushes. And they were able to grow into impressive large trees over hundreds of years. The picture on the left, that's the state champion. That guy there's about 6'3". The diameter on that, I think, is about I think it's about 47 inches wide. So that's about 4 feet wide. So that's a big tree. That's located near New Braunfels. Got another one there, and the state champion's estimated to be about 400 to 650 years old. A lot of people, they don't think that they live for very long. Even when I first started writing my book, people said, well, why are you writing a book about a tree that only lives for 30 years? Well, people get that idea because they keep cutting them down, and so they're never allowed to grow. This is a picture at the Shield Ranch. This one's about 300 to 450 years old. And this one here is growing in the bottomland. That would be the type that they were using definitely more as your more substantial timber trees. That one there is about 150 to 300 years old. And some of them formed vast cedar brake forests. Cedar brake, what people call today, that's not the right term. That's a cedar like thicket. Cedar breaks were forests, old growth forests. This is a regenerating one that's probably about 70 to 80 years old. And the largest one was estimated to cover about 500 square miles. Others grew inside mixed bottomland old growth forest. The mountain cedar in the middle, that's about almost 60 feet tall. And mixed hillside old growth forest. They provide habitat for countless wildlife, including many that were extirpated, including passenger pigeons, jaguars, and black bears. Although the black bears are returning. Y'all been hearing about that? Yes. I don't know if I'll ever be able to live with the jaguar returning, but the black bears coming back would be fantastic. And that's cool. So the trees, not the bushes, the trees helped jumpstart the hill country economy. 1874, in the Austin Daily Democrat Statesman, they wrote the cedar tie business, which is the railroad tie, has contributed largely to the growth and prosperity of the hill city, meaning Austin, in the last 2 years, more especially the last 12 months. So that picture on the right is that's what they would have looked like, where you had strong central trunk with branches coming out. A lot of people will say, oh, those are just eastern red cedar. Well, the way that is, have any of y'all seen how like on the juniper, how each little leaf is like this little tiny little scale thingy? Well, if you pull off the little leaflet, the little tiny leaf of an eastern red cedar, and you look at it under 200 times microscope, its edges are smooth, always. With junipers ashii or ovada, when you look at it under a microscope, it has little tiny tooth edges. So that's how you can always disprove someone. The commissioner's report, Marabou Lomar wrote in 1839, Cypress, meaning bald cypress, together with immense quantities of fine cedar might be readily floated down the stream. They were first used for construction and worm fencing, also called zigzag fencing, which you could quickly install, use a tremendous amount of wood, but you didn't have to do posts. You could like knock that out real quick. Then railroad ties, barbed wire fence posts. This picture here on the left, that's 1860. They're building a railroad to Llano. You can see a bunch of the cedar ties in the middle on the ground. Telegraph poles and telephone poles. The ecological impact was severe. Severe erosion, soil loss, seed bank loss, and dehydration made worse by overgrazing of the open prairies. And the reason why it was so severe is like the clearing that was happening wasn't any different from the way they were clearing in the other parts of the United States. It's just they didn't realize that our conditions are so different and that it would severely impact. And initially, stuff would regrow, but then they cut it again. It would try to regrow. It got smaller and smaller each time. And finally, it gave up. And most of the grasses gave up. A lot of the forest gave up. And that's when the bushy scrub cedars started to spread. It kind of like adapted to this incredibly harsh environment. So rethinking. First thing we need to do is to shift the focus to reducing runoff. We need to switch the thinking that's been going on for the last, half century that we need to increase runoff. And we need to slow it down. We need to spread it and sink it into the ground. And there's places doing this around the world. And it's a very, very fundamentally simple technique. And in the driest areas of Africa, the northern Africa, where it's just desert, they've been digging these little half-moon crescents everywhere. And that's all that they're doing. And then when it does rain, it holds on to that and creates these little dots of green everywhere. So the native people there are very excited because they're like, wow, that's all we got to do. Right now it's like I'll go on Facebook or something and I'll see all these contractors out there. They're saying, hey, we want to come and grind down all your rocks, make it all smooth and clean and neat. These rock grinding machines are used really to make roads and stuff, which is fine. But now they're trying to use them all over the landscape. And so they're trying to smooth everything out. We are not in the land where you want things to be smooth. You want things to be bumpy, to have barriers and stuff like that. Adding barriers, following contours help to reduce the runoff. Here's an extreme example. Y'all have all seen pictures of rice farming in China. And I put this little graphic next to it because not everyone understands what a contour line is. If you've ever gone hiking and used a trail map, and you know how to read the little squiggle lines and all that, each line indicates, okay, you're going up the hill. The next line, okay, you're a little bit higher. And this little graphic shows what on the bottom part in blue, that's what the map would look like. That yellow little thing shows how it looks in 3D. When you raise it up. And when they do the rice farms, they're following these contours. So each of them, if you follow the contour, then that means that when the water reaches that level, it'll spread out. And then you can retain it and you create basically like a linear detention pond. And that's how they're able to do that. If it's sloped, then the water drains off. So you keep it like this, going around at the same level all the way around, then you can collect the water and spread it out and let it soak in. And there's different ways to do this. You can do something as simple as get all your rocks together and do rock gabions. If anyone's heard of Bamberger's Ranch, Sela, they've been doing this out there a lot. It's been really effective. If you have deeper soil, you can use what's called a keyline plow, and you drag it on contour to create these, you slice into the ground to create indentations that as the runoff comes over, it soaks into the ground. Or the picture on the bottom right, those are just cut slash. And don't burn it. Instead, you arrange them on contour so that as the rain comes down, and after even just a few rains, you're going to start seeing silt building up behind it. So you can do like slash windrows, slash matting, contour ribbing, rock buns, diversion berms, water bars, leaky weirs, media lunas, shredded mulch, all these like little words. Um, Also, on areas where you want to reduce the mountain cedar, the scrubby type, obviously we don't want to reduce the forest stuff because that's so rare and precious. But what you want to do instead of trying to go in and clear cut everything is that you patch reduce. And you do like no more than 25% of the time, and you do it following the contour. And this is also part of Dave Bamberger's ranch, where you can see where they have cleared on the contour so that the remaining vegetation and the roots and the leaf litter will help to control that runoff, so it keeps sinking the water into the ground until the new vegetation can grow up. Then you can go and reduce the next area if that's what you want to do. And here's these are becoming pretty common across the hill country, and they're berms and swales on contour. These are to be used definitely applicable for larger, more severe situations. This is shortly. Okay, so then this thing has just been done. Remember that picture I showed before? I said it looked like the lunar, like the moon. That's what this looked like before. Then they went through, they created this corridor. They cut through the scrubby cedar, created this opening, and they shredded the mulch, they spread it, and they used a mini excavator to it's just going down about 12 inches. It's not that deep. And then you scoop that and you pile it up down just right next to it. And that creates a little low berm. And even though it's only this much soil, that's still a lot more soil than what was there, And you can also add some compost and stuff like that to the berm to enrich it. Here they just, do you see how they did chop and drop? Where instead, like burning everything, instead you leave it. And here they're using the cut branches to protect the soil. And 3 years later, that's what it looks like. So the Edwards Aquifer Authority has compiled enough data now, to support the hypothesis that these contoured barriers increase infiltration. So they've been working and measuring for the past few years, and they finally now can say they have enough data to say, yes, this is working. And so that's fantastic news to finally have that hard science coming in to support this, because once you can get that hard science, that means it's going to facilitate getting funding to do these kinds of things. So this is a really important thing. So the other thing with kind of rethinking how we manage, remember I said how everyone just kind of lumps them all together. Well, a better approach would be to classify the tree stands and by general characteristics and general age groups. This is just one way it could be done. You say it forest regrowth, pioneer scrub, and rocky pioneer scrub. And I'll go through and kind of give you some information on each of these. For aging, you can do like little things. Like look at the mountain cedars. If their main trunks or the main stems have a lot of the white patchy bark lichen on them, that means that they're less than 30 to 40 years old. Once they lose that and they start shredding, then they're more than 40 to 50 years old. So that kind of thing. So therefore, if it's younger, it should probably have a different management strategy. Yes.
Very different females on the white line.
I haven't noticed that the lichen prefers girls or boys. It just seems to appear. And sometimes you might find some stands that don't have any of it or just very little. But it appears to be feeding on the sap that's coming out. Because, if you touch the younger cedars, how the bark is real sticky, which is why it's not shredding, because it's sticky from the sap. In fact, Native Americans use juniper sap as a glue. Uh, so it sounds logical. No one's actually researched it, but it sounds like a good hypothesis is that the white bark lichen is growing on that sappy stuff because the minute that it stops being sappy and the heartwood starts to mature, the white lichen goes away. And it'll still persist on the branches and the leaf twigs. I've always had told people that if you see a mountain cedar that has no white lichen on even the tips of its twigs, then you know you got an older one, because that takes a long time, but I don't know how long, but I assume a long time. Uh, and other things that you can look at, while painted buntings and scrub jays can indicate younger forest or scrub, barred owls and golden-cheeked warblers can indicate an older forest. And real quick before I forget is I do have these like little pamphlets here. So the part of the work I'm doing is with Project Bedrock, and we're in the process of developing a online management plan. I don't know if you heard it, like Steve Nally, Peggy Chris, Robert Mace. Do y'all know any of these names? Anyway, really prominent people in restoration in the Hill Country are all part of our team and providing all kinds of feedback on this. And so we're going to have a whole system where you go through and you have all these indicators that will help you figure out the health of your land. So it's going to teach you how to read your land. So by grouping the trees into these categories, you can apply more tailored management strategies. For instance, a forest, you'll want to identify, protect, and enhance so they can continue to sustain springs, soil health, and interior humidity. The forest regrowth, and here's a really great example on the right where you have the regrowth, which is sometimes it'll come in like that, and I call that dog hair regrowth, which is typical of conifers, and aspen trees will do it also, where they just come up really, really tight. It's like, how do you know how to manage that? But that will be a different management. A lot of people will see those and they think that, oh, those are the bad, scrubby stuff. And I'm like, no, those are the ones that are going to become future forest trees. So they should be managed differently. Okay, so the pioneer scrub. Pioneer scrub, you want manage it based on location, age, and health. Open rangelands. And when I say open rangelands, like the area where it's more rolling to level, it's not real hilly, and it's not in the bottomland. So your open rangelands, you're going to want to, you can retain them as is if you want to, or remove them on contour, like I said, no more than 25% at a time. And you want to feed the microbes for more grass. And that usually would mean if you have livestock, is when you're clearing mountain cedars, you need to manage the livestock and move them through the area because their dung has lots of nitrogen and has good microbes in it. They're going to help benefit that grass. It's going to give the grass growth a really good boost. You can't just clear the cedars and think you're done. You have to do these other things. And there are other things like grazing mimicry that you can do, where you go in, you can spray liquid manure compost and stuff like that, where there's one person on our team, he's developing a product based on his goats up in Fredericksburg, where you can go in and you can buy the compost. You can buy this, compost tea. And so it's all local, which is good. And he doesn't use ivermectin for his goats, which is a big problem because then that kills the dung beetles. So it's like if you have this pioneer scrub and your bottomlands are covering the hillsides, though, since those areas want to be more forested, doesn't mean you can't have grass there, but it's just easier to have it be mostly forested just because of the shallow soils and all that. Grasses are still going to have a hard time trying to establish wherever the soils are too shallow. There you're going to want to selectively thin to encourage forest regeneration and or reduce in patches and areas to create grassy meadows and glades, but always with the eye of creating more diversity. Pioneer scrub. Okay, so what are the benefits? I mentioned before about the A&M study that found that more water is soaking under them. Pioneer scrub acts as ecosystem engineers on karst country to increase water, rebuild soil, sink more rain, protect new plants, and increase diversity. Basically, the picture on the left is what you have when it's just degraded, but then mountain cedar scrub will move in and make it be like the picture on the right. And over time, this is again taken. This was Lisa O'Donnell with the city of Austin did this study, and uh, the picture on the left is showing just the soil that she gathered from the open grassy area, and then the picture on the right is what she collected from underneath the mountain cedars. And you want dark because dark means you got carbon. And when you have that carbon in the soil, now if you have sandy soils or granite soils, they react different. But for our limestone soils, the dark, rich stuff definitely indicates that carbon. And as it rains, when rain enters the soil, it combines with that carbon to create a weak acid called carbonic acid. That then leaches through the soil, goes into the limestone, and helps to dissolve it even more so that you can get more groundwater and more infiltration going on. So it's all kind of related. Underneath the mountain cedars, there being the pioneer scrub. Now, of course, this is a forest will already have the system intact. But when an area has been overgrazed, especially when it gets to the surface of the moon kind of stuff, a lot of the soil might be completely missing. And in other instances, the microbiology, the little soil microbes in the soil are going to be very limited. And the junipers, these mountain cedars, are able to start growing even though there's barely any soil biology. That is why they're non-invasive. That's why they are pioneers, because that's something that pioneers can do. Texas bluebonnets, same thing. These are things that can just start growing where nothing else can grow because they're able to tolerate a very sparse buffet of, things to live on. But as the mountain cedars start to grow, and it doesn't happen overnight, sometimes it might. It depends upon how severe it was. If it was a lunar surface, going to take a little bit longer. As they start to grow, you have, who here knows about the mycorrhizal fungi? Really, everyone needs to start learning about it. That will be the next plant of the month. Because it's the new frontier. Everyone's getting into it. It's going to be the way the future of land management. You're going to go out there and you're going to take an analysis of what is the soil fungi like, and then and your bacteria, and then that will tell you what you can do. Yes.
So, companies support this, probably not, right?
Oh, of course not.
Okay.
Yeah, well, okay, so I mean that's actually a big thing on this DMAP thing is I don't want to come out and literally say don't use any chemicals, but we're going to hide it. So it's not like right in your face, but also is to find the chemicals that do not have a long life in the soil, which means they're going to have less impact on the soil microbes and less chance of contaminating the soil. So whenever you have to use chemicals, one, be extremely careful, better to hire a professional, but just do spot treatments or do the hack and squirt for larger trees where you get a machete or hatchet and just go around and then you squirt inside there. So broadcast spraying, we shouldn't be doing that. And yes, it's cheap. Yes, it's fast, but it causes so much harm down the road that it's very difficult to come back from that. You can, but it's very difficult. So in the long run, it's better to kind of go slower. But underneath the mountain cedar, so as they're growing, you have two basic types of fungi. You have the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungus and the ectomycorrhizal. The arbuscular is like more ancient and older. So that's what our junipers use. So as they start to spread, they start to reactivate it to enhance it so that it gets more and more. They drop those leaves. You're talking about evergreen. Um, Junipers shed all the time. So in essence, they're evergreen because they never completely lose the leaves like the evergreen sumac or the live oak. They're constantly shedding those leaves all the time, and they're slightly acidic. And so that helps to balance out that high pH of the limestone. And it just gives that, in the shade that it creates and all that. So they start to develop these fungal mats underneath. Once those mats are formed, then the live oaks and other trees can start to grow. The live oaks need the ectomycorrhizal fungus, but until they get started, they can start growing next to the junipers and tap into these fungal mats so then they can start growing. That's why the live oak can't be the pioneer. I've had so many people, why can't the live oak do it? I'm like, well, because of that, because they're not pioneers. They cannot start in that degraded of a condition. And a lot of people say, oh, live oaks, the cedars are choking the oaks. Well, this is a great picture here. The arrow's pointing at a large mountain cedar and a giant live oak, and they're both just hunky-dory fine. There's no choking going on. They use water from different levels. Live oaks grow their roots a lot deeper. They use them at different times. It's just, we think that the mountain cedars are so bad that when we see them growing next to our precious live oaks, we think, oh, there must be evil intent, right? No, they're fine. They like each other. Okay, the next two here are new slides here based on my previous presentation. So I don't know if this is going to be clear. People are always asking, what happens if the pioneer scrub, you don't do anything? Won't it just grow into a new forest? Well, you have to understand, okay, see my little guy there? The scrub bush never really gets much taller than 15 feet. So the little green things in there are the little live oaks coming up. As the live oaks grow up, they start to shade out because the live oaks grow taller than the scrub. And they're able to because they're coming up with all that nice fungi and good soil and all that organic matter. So they end up shading out. And then you see the dark green, then those are the tree like cedars coming up underneath. So it's just called ecological succession. However, if this is growing on top of a very, very dry hillside, nothing will ever get much taller than 20 feet up there. So therefore, the little bushy ones will just continue to get older and older and older because not much will shade them out. So in some instances that you will find on top of very, very dry hills, they'll still just look like very, very large, twisted, bushes. But that's because they never got completely shaded out. So the last little group here is Rocky Pioneer shrub. This is the lunar moon one. And this is the one that is desperate for our help. Nature is like, I don't know what to do with this. It's been so severely degraded. It's going to need more dedicated runoff management and soil enrichment. Remember the berms and swales that I showed before? That would be a good thing to do there. Any kind of like mulch berms, that kind of thing. So wrap up. Mountain cedars thrive on limestone karst country regions. They're most common in the hill country. Karst country complexity, climate, and soils makes clearing brush especially harmful. Mountain cedars are a symptom, not the cause of our problems. The problem is excessive runoff. And improving how we manage mountain cedars can help mitigate droughts, wildfires, and floods. If you want to do anything, read my book, Wanted Mountain Cedars, Dead and Alive. And basically, it tells the story of the hill country through the eyes of a mountain cedar. You'll learn a lot about the history of the hill country and like the whole thing of like its economic importance in the past and stuff like that. A lot more detail about that, about how things were going on. Also spread the word that mountain cedars are helping to regenerate the hill country. If you're willing to have someone throw their lunch at you, You can invite me to speak at your local groups, and also go to Project Bedrock to subscribe and follow the work that we're doing. A lot of the Mountain Cedar stuff will be integrated into the process that we're doing. The QR code takes you to the Project Bedrock website. And we just have a one page thing right now that gives a little bit more breakdown what the DMAP process will be doing, has 6 steps. And you can learn there, subscribe, so you can just kind of stay up to date. Questions? Comments are good. I like comments.
You seem to have a really good understanding of just how everything works together as a system. I mean, you're pointing out these little myths, how they're just kind of tunnel vision kind of.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with how you're explaining it.
Well, thank you. Well, you know why? It's because my background is ecology. And in ecology, they're teaching you how to look at entire systems and how things all come together. So that's just how it's trained to see everything coming together. But a lot of science that's being done is done in isolation. But I've been noticing how, like this, the juniper research with the water and all that stuff, they're starting now to bring in other scientists and, geologists, to not be so focused on one little thing. But thank you. And I also took a course, but I went to A&M for graduate school. And while I was there, I took a course called is cultural geography. And the main thing was teaching you how to read the landscape. Now there was teaching you how to read really the cultural landscape, like cities and towns and all that, railroads and all that. But I've been able to apply that into the ecology, how to read the ecology. So, yes.
So the land that I live on, the cedar was harvested for fence posts at least a couple of times. I've lived there for 38 years or so. And are my scrubs, my trees gonna stay short?
I would have to see pictures. You can do that. Like you could, if you did that thing, or you can just pick up on these and then just shoot me an email and send me some pictures with kind of like a location, like on a map where I can kind of see the context, because it's also, it changes constantly. And that's what I'm saying, is that we need to stop taking this one size fits all approach and to create more site specific solutions. Yeah.
I keep calling them mountain cedars if they're not cedars, and let that phrase fade away.
Because it's because it's just is like a cluster thing. So instead of saying junipers, acacia, and ovada, and the hybrids, I just say mountain cedars. And like I said, it's like people keep thinking that it has something to do with the genus. It doesn't. It has to do with the fact that they have cedar oil. That's just, it's like, I mean, it's a Texas thing to do. We call all skid steers bobcats. I mean, I remember when I went up to New York City one time, I was flying somewhere and I was at the airport and I said, what kind of Cokes do y'all have? It's like diet, regular, I was like, oh, wait. Oh yeah, what kind of pop do y'all have? It's soda, or like all tissues are Kleenex, all copiers are Xerox. So it's just a Texas thing. Anyway, what else? Anything else? Okay.